This is the crux of the work on which I have been singularly focused for the last 16 months, the question of why privacy matters, a question that has arisen in the context of a global debate enabled by the revelations of Edward Snowden that the United States and its partners, unbeknownst to the entire world, has converted the internet, once heralded as an unprecedented tool of liberation and democratization, into an unprecedented zone of mass indiscriminate surveillance.
While to some it still may remain a conspiracy theory, governments and organizations around the world are without a doubt gathering information about your life and tying it together for profit or power purposes. While many refuse to care about privacy concerns, others are intentionally misled by companies and governments. You may sometimes hear a company state that they never listen in on your phone conversations or texts or emails. But as we are about to see, this is not enough. Using metadata, companies and government agencies can easily, and in many cases more precisely, find information about you using only things like who you called, how many times you called them, and the duration of these conversations. With this information, your entire life can be drawn out. At this point of the video, you may be asking yourself why any of this really matters. You've heard so many arguments for privacy that you're sick of it. Why does it even matter? I have nothing to hide, therefore who cares if Apple, Google, or Microsoft, or the NSA, or the CIA, or Mossad knows what I browse or the recipe I shared with my aunt? This is the most common argument against privacy, and one that initially can make a lot of sense to people. But before you turn this video off and move on to something else, let's listen to Glenn Greenwood explain why you should care in the following clip. It's quite convincing and will change your mind rather quickly.
There is a very common sentiment that arises in this debate, even among people who are uncomfortable with mass surveillance, which says that there's no real harm that comes from this large-scale invasion because only people who are engaged in bad acts have a reason to want to hide and to care about their privacy. This worldview is implicitly grounded in the proposition that there are two kinds of people in the world, good people and bad people. Bad people are those who plot terrorist attacks or who engage in violent criminality and therefore have reasons to want to hide what they're doing, have reasons to care about their privacy. But by contrast, good people are people who go to work, come home, raise their children, watch television. They use the internet not to plot bombing attacks, but to read the news or exchange recipes or to plan their kids' Little League games. And those people are doing nothing wrong and therefore have nothing to hide and no reason to fear the government monitoring them. The people who are actually saying that are engaged in a very extreme act of self-deprecation. What they're really saying is, I have agreed to make myself such a harmless and unthreatening and uninteresting person that I actually don't fear having the government know what it is that I'm doing. This mindset has found what I think is its purest expression in a 2009 interview with the longtime CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt, who, when asked about all the different ways his company is causing invasions of privacy for hundreds of millions of people around the world, said this. He said, if you're doing something that you don't want other people to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place.
Now that you understand why we should take privacy seriously, we can now break down the different tactics companies use to break through the light barrier we have put up. Modern corporations and governments find themselves challenged by many different individuals who claim they are not taking privacy seriously. This is especially true following the discovery of the PRISM program and others similar to it. Now, when challenged, leaders of these organizations are quick to point to the fact that they do not listen to your phone calls or read your text messages. But what if that didn't really matter and all they were doing is avoiding the real issue? How else are they using other forms of data to capture and learn about your behavior? This brings us to one of the most infamous scandals that revealed to the world what is possible with little effort, the Abu Omar case, also known as the Italian job. To begin, we have to go back to the early 2000s, in an area post 9/11 where terrorism and its threats were at all-time highs. The United States government started to get very paranoid. So paranoid, it introduced questionable policies in their war against terrorism. One of those questionable policies was something called extraordinary rendition, a fancy word to describe a government-sponsored abduction in which you kidnap a person of interest in a foreign country and then move them to another country to circumvent the former country's laws on interrogation and torture. It's quite an insane act that is essentially considered a crime against humanity. So this brings us to Hassan Mustafa Osama Nazar, known as Abu Omar. Omar was an Egyptian cleric who was an alleged member of a terrorist group. He fled Egypt to Italy and was granted political asylum in 2001. He held an Italian passport and was a legal resident as of 2003. Unfortunately for Omar, Italian and American intelligence agencies were worried about his potential links to Al-Qaeda. He was supposedly recruiting foreign fighters to fight in Iraq, although this was before the US had invaded. On February 17, 2003, Abu was abducted as he walked into his mosque in Milan for noon prayers. The kidnapping obviously drew attention, and many wondered who had done this. What unfolded next was one of the largest CIA meltdowns of all time and proof that simple metadata can bring down a superpowers intelligence network. Omar that night, as we later found out, was taken to a German Air Force base and moved to a cell in Egypt where he underwent torture and interrogation. The Italians had one lead on the case. There was a young mother and her children who witnessed the abduction. She had an approximate time and location. This was enough for the Italian investigators to receive a cell phone dump of all the cell data within a 4-hour time frame for that particular location. After that data had been collected and organized, the investigators began to visualize all this. This is explained by Matthew Cole in an infamous presentation he did for Black Hat USA 2013. Here he is explaining it.
The investigators come back with data. And that data was analyst's notebook, which gave them everything that they could want to know about metadata and phones being used in the spot and around. After about a month and a half of investigation, they started to find something really interesting. So what we see here is a closed-off network of roughly 18 individuals using about 30 phones that, in essence, only were used to talk to each other. So they were a completely quarantined network. Now, if you are a prosecutor looking and sifting through metadata, this here sticks out a lot, and it sticks out like a sore thumb. Now, the term for the people who are on the street that the CIA was employing called snapshots. They do surveillance all around the world. They try to blend in and look like tourists or just locals. They have, in a sense, they have the low end of the job, but it's quite important because they are the ones who are exposed physically. They come into the country under aliases, sometimes under real name, and they go about doing their business to try to grab people or figure out if someone's being followed. So when the Italian prosecutors were looking at the network, they could see that there was some kind of conspiracy going on. It was a good circumstantial case that they could start to build.
That brings us back to 2020 and where we stand today. If this type of analysis could be done by regular people in 2003, can you imagine what metadata can do for companies and organizations with billions of dollars at their disposal and hundreds of PhDs in their workforces? Companies are working round the clock developing algorithms to ensure they can sell you a specific product, identify your politics, generate content, and have you spend your hard-earned money on something they're making. While these reasons may not sound sinister, the line between good and bad can creep up fast as society slowly tears apart and we begin to live in a world that is inching towards more and more division.
Over the last 16 months, as I've debated this issue around the world, every single time somebody has said to me, I don't really worry about invasions of privacy because I don't have anything to hide, I always say the same thing to them. I get out a pen, I write down my email address, I say, here's my email address. What I want you to do when you get home is email me the passwords to all of your email accounts. Not just the nice, respectable work one in your name, but all of them. Because I want to be able to just troll through what it is you're doing online, read what I want to read, and publish whatever I find interesting. After all, if you're not a bad person, if you're doing nothing wrong, you should have nothing to hide. Not a single person has taken me up on that offer. I check that email account religiously all the time. It's a very desolate place. And there's a reason for that, which is that we as human beings, even those of us who in words disclaim the importance of our own privacy, instinctively understand the profound importance of it. It is true that as human beings we're social animals, which means we have a need for other people to know what we're doing and saying and thinking, which is why we voluntarily publish information about ourselves online. But equally essential to what it means to be a free and fulfilled human being is to have a place that we can go and be free of the judgmental eyes of other people.
Thank you guys for watching. Please make sure you hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed. Don't forget to like and drop a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are on privacy and what you do to ensure you're protected.